Hello, everyone. I'm Justine with State of Grace Tarot. Thank you all so much for joining me today for my weekly check-in. I really enjoy doing these. As a reminder, this is just a general reading for the week. I like to do my readings from Monday through Sunday just to get a general feel of the upcoming week and weekend and what energies we're dealing with and things that, maybe we need to contemplate as we go through the week. So this reading is for April 14th through the 20th, ending on Easter Sunday. So just keep in mind this is a general reading, meaning it may not connect, which is totally normal. I appreciate you all taking the time to sit with me and watch the reading. So feel free to take what resonates and leave the rest. So let's see, I'm all shuffled up. Let's see what our overall energy for the week is going to be. For overall energy, we have the Queen of Pentacles. I really love the Queen of Pentacles, and that, she's a very comforting and nurturing presence, right? I feel like she can be someone who can get things done, but not necessarily in a rough or judgmental way. She's able to accomplish what she wants. She's, if she's a businesswoman, she's, got control over her realm, but isn't necessarily cynical or inflexible. She's definitely someone you can work with to get whatever you need done. So I really like the Queen of Pentacles energy for this week. So what we need to know, we have the Two of Pentacles. What we need to do, we have the Five of Swords. What we need to release, the Devil. And what we need to contemplate, we have the Page of Cups. And at the bottom of the deck, we have the Knight of Pentacles. So what we need to know this week, we have the Two of Pentacles, which is, the twos are about balance, and the Two of Pentacles is balance in the suit of Earth, which deals with material things. So, the Two of Pentacles is about dealing with priorities and, being able to make decisions between two different projects or paths that we need to go down. And, maybe it's not a decision between it, but it's being able to prioritize what's more important or more urgent at the time. So, for what we need to know this week, it does feel like maybe there's a little bit of prioritization, and that we're going to be pulled in multiple directions, and there's going to be a little bit of trade-off this week, right? But just know, we're channeling our Queen of Pentacles energy. And so we are going to be able to manage all the priorities and juggle all the balls. One of the things that I like to talk about at work is, we're always juggling balls, but, you can't let the crystal balls drop, right? The ones that are not breakable, the little rubber balls, like those can fall by the wayside sometimes. Those are okay if we drop them. but the crystal balls that we're juggling, you have to be able to prioritize those, and you can't let the more important things fall to the wayside. And so being able to prioritize this week is going to be very crucial, is what it seems like. What we need to do, we have the Five of Swords. And to me, the Five of Swords is an interesting card. Fives are about instability and friction. And in the suit of air, the swords, it's dealing with thought and communication. So to me, this 5 this week specifically is, for what we need to do is, where are we standing up for ourselves and creating friction, or where are other people creating friction that we need to come to terms with that noise? Where do we need to bring this calm Queen of Pentacles energy into situations that have a lot of different opinions and different ideas, and being able to make a decision and lead from a place of knowledge and wisdom, but not necessarily being the person who tramples everybody else and does not give room for other people's opinions, right? It's not necessarily a battle of wit and will. It's how do you bring people together as a team in order to come together and achieve a goal. On a more individual level, maybe there's a lot of different thoughts going on in your mind, or you're coming to a realization or a disillusionment, and you're having a hard time coming to terms with that. I think really focusing on the getting out of your head and into your body more with the Queen of Pentacles and the Two of Pentacles is a great way. And even the Knight of Pentacles, someone dependable and steady. Getting out of your mind and into your body will help reduce the volume of the noise going on in your head a little bit. Sometimes that helps, because in what we need to release, we have the Devil, which, is a card of being trapped in cycles that do not serve us. It's the temptation of eating unhealthy. It's just one time, it's just one meal, or eating a bag of candy. It's just that one bag of candy. Not that there's anything wrong with eating those things, especially if it's one time, but it's the being trapped in the cycle. I know if I start eating one thing unhealthy, it could lead to a second meal and then a third meal, and then you're trapped in that cycle, and it's hard to get out of it, and you start beating yourself up, and that's where the Five of Swords comes in, and you're really trying to break out of these cycles and that bondage that you feel like a slave to the decisions that you've made, the temptations that you've allowed yourself. So what we need to release this week is that feeling of being trapped, and taking steps, even if they're small, little baby micro habit steps, release any guilt that we feel for, bowing to whatever, bad habits that we have. Release that guilt. We don't need it. It doesn't serve us. And, take steps towards what we need to in order to feel better and to start getting out of this cycle of feeling trapped and coming up more towards the light and, making good choices. So I feel like that's what we need to release this week. What we need to contemplate, we have the Page of Cups. This page is someone, deeply in touch with their emotions. Maybe they're very sensitive intuitively. Maybe they lean a little bit fragile. So thinking about places where we can be a little bit more sensitive and nice to people. I feel like, channeling this Queen of Pentacles energy as far as being comforting, but also where can we bring in that nurturing and that softer energy in our lives. Or maybe we have too much of this energy in our lives and we need to be a little bit more stern and a little bit more focused. Are we being too sensitive somewhere? Releasing our habits. Maybe we're being a little bit too hard on ourselves and a little bit too sensitive. And part of the step of releasing is seeing where we've become a little bit too fragile and we need to be a little bit more stern and inflexible with ourselves. And putting in a structure a little bit more, which will give us good boundaries. So let's see if there's any other energies that we're dealing with this week that we need to be aware of. Okay. We have attachment and vision and waiting. So I feel like this attachment kind of speaks to this Devil card, and that we're very attached to something that's holding us back a little bit, and we need to release that. So, what are we waiting for in order to do that? Waiting when we have a decision to make. Maybe we're making that decision with knowledge, but maybe we're just sitting and waiting and not taking action. Waiting isn't necessarily always a good thing, right? Maybe it's procrastinating and we need to take a step forward. I do really like this vision. And what do we envision for our future, and can we see that vision? Queens are people, if we're leading and owning our realm that we can control around us. I feel like the energy of a queen is someone who has vision, has perspective, and is able to execute on that perspective. So where are we taking a moment to really see what we can see and growing from there? What vision do we have for our lives, and what steps are we taking to move away from things that are holding us back and attachments that are no longer serving us? How are we taking step and taking action towards this vision that we have of ourselves and our lives? So I think that's about all I have. Let's get a general message from the Oracle for us to carry with us this week. We have, let it come forth. Give yourself permission to feel it. I do feel like this speaks to the general message and the general theme of things. You know, we have the Page of Cups, which is about, being in touch with your emotions. So let ourselves feel what we need to feel. Maybe we're scared of feeling some of our feelings, and that we'll spiral out of control. But, if you pause and reflect and know you have the strength of the Queen of Pentacles, who, is very comforting, give yourselves permission to feel it. I know this hits, very strongly for me this week. And I know I have things that are going to come up this week, like putting the headstone on my father's grave and, laying him to rest this weekend, and, giving myself permission to feel that is a little scary. I'll even admit that. So it's interesting that this comes up, and if there's things like that happening in your lives, or things that you're avoiding getting into your feels about, sometimes I say, oh, I'm just too busy at work, like I need to get things done. And so that helps me push aside emotions, right? If you let yourself be busy, you're not necessarily letting yourself feel. So taking a moment and giving yourself permission to feel, and trust that you're not going to fall apart. I feel like that's a good message for us to carry with us this week. I know it's very helpful for me in my own path for this week. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this reading, and I will see you again soon.